Good evening, and welcome to the Temple-Tifereth Israel and the TWA Women's Programming. Tonight we are very excited to share programming called Love Is Part 2, and our guests are from the LGBT Center of Greater Cleveland. And I'm really proud to introduce these two lovely ladies who I work with and know. Gulnar is going to introduce her partner.
Thank you so much for having us. My name's Gulnar Farasta. I use she and they pronouns, and we'll talk a little bit about pronouns as part of our presentation. And I am the Senior Director of Programs at the LGBT Center. Cannot tell you what an honor and privilege it is to be here. We love partnering with the Temple Association and with the National Council of Jewish Women, as we have in the past. This is one of our favorite partnerships, so we're very excited to be here. I'm very thrilled to introduce my colleague, Denise Astorino, who will be kicking us off with our training. Denise is the Community Engagement and Volunteer Coordinator at the LGBT Center. I'm gonna hand it off to Denise.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Ooh, my voice is loud even without the mic, so. Hey, James, if you could, I can't forward the slides with the door shut. Thank you. Hi, so that's us, as you stated. My pronouns are she and her again, and as Gulnar stated, I am Denise Astorino. For more information, we have handouts for you at the end of the presentation, but there's also more information on our actual programs that are out at the desk where you signed in at, and both my card and Gulnar's. So after this, please feel free that if you want to reach out to us, if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. So, okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the things that when we talk about ground rule, when we talk about allyship and any kind of training that we do in the community, we want this to be a safe space for everyone. So the ground rules that we give, it's more of a let's create a respectful space for everyone. So we create a safe space, we respect everyone, and we're here to learn and grow. So please keep an open mind and do not mind my bad jokes that I give as well. So you can forward, please. Thank you. I just want to give a refresher for a few of the LGBTQ plus terms that you might have gone over. Abbreviation is, again, for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. It is an umbrella term for a diverse group of people, and you may see some variation of it depending on, you know, what we say is that the more academic or scholarly the material is, you may see LGBT plus, LGBTQI, etc. And we talked a little bit in your last session about sexual orientation versus gender identity. We'll just briefly go over that before we hit allyship. But again, those are some of the main general LGBTQ plus terms. So just briefly again, touching on sexual orientation versus gender. Sexual orientation describes the person that we are attracted to, both physically, sexually. You may hear lesbian, gay, bisexual, straight. This is a different term than gender identity. Gender identity is one's perception of oneself, whether they identify as man, woman, or something else. Non-binary, you will see transgender, you will see cisgender. Man, woman, genderqueer, non-binary. The two are separate. So that's what we like to, those are the 2 points we like to cover, is sexual orientation is different from gender identity. Do you all know what cisgender stands? Okay, thank you. Okay, so cisgender replies to someone who is born and identifies as the sex they were assigned at birth. So I was born and assigned female. I identify as a female. Someone who was born and assigned with, they say they were born with female, but they identify as a male, they will identify as a trans male. So that's the difference between cis and trans. Cis is, I'm born this way, I agree with how I'm born. Trans is nope, I don't agree with it, this is how I identify. Thank you. Okay. So some of the language that we are accustomed to: sex assigned at birth, gender identity, sexual orientation, and gender expression. Really quick, gender expression. So gender identity, you think in here. It's internal. This is how I see myself. This is how I identify. Where gender expression, this is how I present to the world at large. So a gender expression might be if you're non-binary, if you are feminine, if you are masculine. If you're non-binary, you may, a good example I give is if you're wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. It can be, there's no gender that's accustomed to white t-shirt and jeans. It could be any gender. It neither plays towards masculine nor feminine. Non-binary, gender fluid. Make sense? That is gender expression, how we present to the outside world. The Q word, queer. Strange, odd. Denoting or relating to a sexual or gender identity that does not correspond to established ideas of sexuality and gender, especially heteronormative norms. In my community, it was derogatory. It was an insult. There are many people now that are reclaiming it. They are taking it back. They identify as queer. So the point that I make to you as allies, you heard us, and we will again talk about pronouns, but you heard us give our pronouns, like she, her. How I identify myself, Denise Astorino, I identify as a lesbian. If someone identifies as queer, if it ever comes up where you are repeating that back to them or you are talking, what I tell you, do not be afraid to identify that person as queer. If I come to you and say, I'm Denise, my identity is queer, and you have to restate that, do not fear to say that to someone because you feel like you are going to be derogatory towards them or you're insulting them. That is their identity. So you're free to give that back to them. That is a sign of respect for that. I would much rather someone give that identity back to me than give me something else because they're afraid that they're going to insult me. So I just want you to understand that. Okay. And we just talked a little bit about gender expression. The way that one presents their gender through other dress, grooming practices, mannerisms. So you may see, I'm trying to get my masculine, feminine, androgynous, gender neutral, gender nonconforming, queer, cross-dressing. Now, some of those, just really quickly, gender neutral, gender nonconforming. Most of the times I do these trainings, people are like, what does that mean? So androgynous is the umbrella term over gender neutral and gender nonconforming. Gender neutral, remember the example I gave you about the jeans and the t-shirt, okay? Two different people identifying two different ways may come in and be wearing jeans and a t-shirt. You don't know how I identify, you don't know how this other person identifies, but the jeans are neutral. So that is, they're neither looked at nor masculine nor feminine. Gender nonconforming, there's one day, I love to give this example. Right now, I'm a little on the femme side, it's pink, but it's a utility jumpsuit. Next week, you'll see me in a tie and a vest. It's gender nonconforming. A lot of people today you'll see in the news, in the Hollywood, like Harry Styles coming in the sequins jumpsuit. He's like, hey, everybody, gender nonconforming. They do not conform to the norms that we were raised with, that men must wear pants and suits and women must wear skirts. Gender nonconforming. They dress how they like. One other one that I want to bring up, but I bring it up at the very end, is drag. Drag has an asterisk by it. Has anyone seen a drag show? You. Tell me what you think about when you think drag. Anybody? Oh, you're brilliant. Yes, entertainment. What is it about drag performers that catches your eye about them? Yep. Very, very like over the top, extravagant. Yes. Drag. Drag is an entertainment. You can do drag and you can identify however you want to. Drag does not denote transgender, okay? That's the biggest thing that people mistake sometimes. You will see somebody who is just in the early stages of transitioning, okay? They may still have masculine qualities. If it's a male transitioning to a female, they may still have masculine qualities, but they are dressing female because that's how they identify. Drag is an over-the-top expression of either uber femininity, uber masculinity. It is a theatrical. I have 20 plus years in theater. I know this it's very stylized theatricality. You can be straight, you can be drag, you can do drag. You can be a female doing drag as a female. You can be a female doing drag as a male. That does not denote your identity. It does not say, if I were going in, I've done Frank Sinatra drag before. Had the stipple and everything. I did a great job too. So, but I don't identify as a gay male. I don't identify as a trans male. I'm a lesbian. It's a theatricality, so thank you, it's entertainment. The other one is cross-dressing. Someone who is cross-dressing is not a drag performer. This is an individual who, even if they are not transitioning, they still may identify in female clothing. They may not live an everyday life as a transgender female, but they still, at some point, will be wearing a female or a male, you know what I mean? So they are not drag performers. The thing to take away from that is be mindful of stereotypes. That's what my little thing was about, be mindful of stereotypes. Does anybody have any questions on this? No? Okay. And we will have time for Q&A at the end too. Next, maestro. Thank you. Okay, the trans community. It's important to remember that sexual orientation and gender identity, they are separate concepts, which means a trans person can be transgender, they can be straight, they can be gay, bisexual, or any other sexual orientation. Just because you are a trans female does not mean you are attracted to a trans female. You can be a trans female, identify as a lesbian, or you can be a trans female and be straight and be going with a cisgender male. Anybody can identify as anybody and be attracted to anyone. Transgender people are the gender that they identify with. If I were to come to you and say, hello, my name is Denise, I identify as a transgender female. Do not ask me, but are they really a man? That's not how I identify. I identify as a female. So that is how the transgender people identify with. The experiences of trans folks, they're extremely different from peer to peer based on the intersection. It is not a universal story of once upon a time there was a trans person, period. It is a different story. Your story is different, my story is different from yours, my story is different from yours. I have your exact hair when my hair grows out. It's super curly, but your life is different than mine. My life is different than every one of yours. So do not assume, again, the biggest thing on takeaway, do not fall into stereotypes. And there is no one way for a trans person to live their identity. Everyone's story is different. Be mindful of language. LGBTQ identities are adjectives. LGBT people, not the LGBTs, which I keep threatening that one of these days I'm gonna make a singing group called the LGBTs. So avoid outdated terminology because it can have negative connotations. We do not say transsexuality. We do not say homosexuality. Even to say them, they're clinical. Do you not feel a little like, ooh, like a cold flu just like flew through? They're a little clinical, it's a little medical. We don't use them. Avoid coded language, alternative lifestyle. preferences. We're not, yeah, that's a whole other story, but avoid asking. If you ask someone your pronouns, which again, when we talk about pronouns, you do not have to say, what is your preference? You just say, may I ask your pronouns, okay? We'll just say no slurs or pejoratives. How about that? We'll just go with that. Flat out rule, good rule to live by. Use people's chosen names and pronouns. Next. And hey, pronouns, that thing I keep talking about. Pronouns. It's importance of allowing individuals to self-identify. Relying on expression can be useful for some and not for others. It may vary by culture. And if all fails, ask. So here's what I say about pronouns. We give ours. Hi, my name's Denise Astorino. My pronouns are she, her. If you choose in a situation to give your pronoun, it tells the whole world, hi, I'm an ally, without saying, hi, I'm an ally. It allows people like me to feel, okay, this person sees me. This person sees me. Now, here's the thing. Again, you may ask, may I have your pronoun? The person may tell you. You may say, Jeannie, hi, my name's Denise Astorino, she, her. May I have your pronouns? She, her. Thank you very much. Here's the thing. Do not be offended if a person does not share their pronouns. They just may not. You have to go with the information that you are given, if that makes sense. You're offering yours. You're offering the olive branch, you're offering the safe space. All you can do is allow the person then to respond as they do. But as an ally, you're saying, I'm here for you. I'm here for you, and I am offering this space to you. Now, with pronouns, you see they, them, theirs, he, him, his, she, her, hers, they, theirs, theirs, and they, them, theirs. These, the last two especially, people that may use they, them, theirs, or the last two may identify as non-binary, may identify as genderqueer. Again, you take them as they identify. Are there any questions on pronouns? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sure, I love that question. So for me, as somebody who identifies as both she, the feminine, but also they, I identify as genderqueer. Sometimes I know I present more feminine and lean into my feminine identity because that's how I was raised. But where I feel most comfortable is when I'm leaning into the genderqueer, non-binary identity. That's how I feel the most myself, because I feel like I'm not being forced into a box with expectations, especially for me coming from a culture that is more conservative and has very strict norms around gender roles and what are the expectations of women and girls and what are the expectations of boys and men, and I just don't feel like I fit those traditional expectations. I'll share a quick story. As you know, growing up as a child, I would have family members constantly tell me like, well, like it's sad that you're not beautiful and skinny like XYZ actress that we see, or you don't meet these idealized notions of what a feminine woman should be. I would be told that, oh, you're too loud. Girls aren't supposed to be that loud. You're too boisterous. That's too manly. Who's gonna want to marry a manly woman? And so, I just kind of leaned into that, and I was like, you know what? I feel that people are both comprised of masculine energy and feminine energy, and I feel like I have both, and that's who I am. Mm-hmm. Does that help?
Somebody identified strongly as a she or a he, then would they ever use they?
It would depend on where they are in their identity journey. So if they're pretty strong on in identifying as cisgender, so you know, born with the gender assigned female at birth, and I feel very strongly that that's who they are, then they might stick to she pronouns their whole life. Whereas, you know, there might come a time in their life where they're like, you know what, that just doesn't fit right anymore. It doesn't feel right. So they might move towards they or other forms of gender neutral pronouns, or if they're transitioning, they might start using he pronouns.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the questions because I know that this can be confusing and hard. I call myself a baby queer. I didn't come out even to myself until late 2018. So I was like 33 years old, and I'd never had, and I'll talk a little bit about this when we get into allyship, but you know, coming out at that age, there was so much language and so much culture that I didn't know of. I didn't know how to navigate it, even though I identify as part of the community. I feel language is so important because in my culture, there is no language to talk about LGBTQ identity or queer identity. There's not even a word for it. So I feel that having this language, I felt so empowered to be able to finally have the words to express who I am. And so I thank you for being so open and asking those questions.
I recently met a young woman who was 18, and she told her parents she would like to be fluid. And the mother told the grandmother that she is not to refer to the granddaughter as she. And I need help understanding what fluid means and how she will be identified. The grandmother totally rejected this.
Absolutely. So as Gulnar was saying, and thank you for that, I want to thank everybody again, and Gulnar, for the vulnerability, because that's what makes this the safe space. Somebody who identifies as fluid would be very much, as Gulnar said, with pronouns. They may identify as they. They do not fall into the gender of the classifications of she or he. They may say, remember we talked about gender nonconforming. So they may some days feel that they are more masculine, they may feel that they are more feminine, they may not use those classifications at all. So by someone saying that they're fluid, that means they choose the they pronoun to be able to explore those new boundaries.
I would just add to that to say that, you know, I think of gender as a spectrum, and on one end you have female, and on the other end you have male, and then there's a whole spectrum of everything else in between. And I think of gender fluid, and again, this is my understanding of it, because every person who's living in that identity and living that journey may feel differently about it, but the general understanding is that, you know, when you're gender fluid, you are moving from one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum. Sometimes you might be right in the middle. Sometimes you might be leaning more into your masculine energy. Other times you might be leaning more into your feminine energy, or you might, you know, feel like, okay, I'm just neutral. And so I would, you know, in terms of how that individual might be identified, I would ask them how, you know, what pronouns they would prefer to be used. I know folks that say I have no pronouns. So then you just refer to them as their name, right? And when you're in a conversation with them, you know, you say you, and when you're talking to them, but when you are referring to them, instead of saying, she said this, it could be, well, Amy said this, or Amy asked me to share this information, or Amy asked for help on this, whatever it is. You just, switch in the person's name instead of where you would use he or she pronouns. Yeah.
Excuse me, I should have followed up on this also. So if a person says that they are fluid, can they go towards a man or a woman in their relationships? It just depends on how they feel at any particular time.
So this is where sometimes it can be confusing, and I had such a hard time with this too, is one is the gender identity. So if they're identifying in terms of their gender as fluid, that could be completely different than how they identify in terms of their sexual orientation, so who they are attracted to. But like fluid, you could be attracted to people of the same sex, people of the opposite sex, people who are other people who are gender fluid or non-conforming. It's really I like to think of it as a spectrum, and you're turning the dial either in one direction or another direction or somewhere in the middle, depending on how you perceive yourself and where you are.
Yeah, I think that just to piggyback off of that, the term fluid, we talked about umbrella terms. That's not an umbrella term. Fluid does not denote, if I said I'm fluid, it does not incorporate my sexual orientation and my gender identity and my expression. You would need more information from the individual themselves if they are fluid within who they're attracted to, who their sexual orientation is, or if it's their gender identity. So it's a good question. So yeah.
Does that help?
helpful?
It does help. It's
Okay.
just that she said, my friend said to me, when I introduced her, I will introduce her as my granddaughter. But that's not what she wants.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the question is,
Grandchild.
how does the grandmother introduce the grandchild?
This is my grandchild.
Just like that. It's as simple as, instead of saying she went to the store, or my granddaughter or my grandson went to this is my grandchild. Child is a very gender neutral term. So yeah.
That's what I told her.
Well, good for you.
Yay!
Awesome.
If I had a gold star, you'd get it. Yeah. Very cool. And here's, when we say all else fails, ask. I don't know if that's the next slide. May I see the next slide, please? Oh, I'm sorry?
It was right at the bottom.
Oh, okay, yes. So here's the thing about pronouns, that your takeaway with this. You may make a mistake. As Gulnar was saying, we're still learning. Just because we live this every day, I just turned 49, okay? I taught college a few years ago. That was the first time, 4 years ago was the first time, about 6 years ago was the first time I heard about they, them pronouns. And I was like, sorry? I've been an out lesbian since I was 27, and I was like, I had a student come up and say, Miss Astorino, I have no idea. I said, I am not, I don't go by she, they, she, her, I go by they, them. And I was like, okay, sure. And I just went with it. I was like, yeah, you go, all right. But then I was like, I had no idea. You may make mistakes. You may call someone the wrong pronoun. You may have, when I said to you, you're going off of the information that you are given. You make a judgment based on respect, but you may make a mistake. What you do is that you learn from it. You say you're sorry, you learn from it, and you move on. You don't do a lot of, I'm so sorry, you just move on, because the person that you gave the wrong pronoun to, they would like to move on too. You cannot be afraid to make a mistake. Everyone learns, everyone has a starting point of learning. So, yes.
I'm wondering, is this just for a certain age group at this era, so that people maybe of my age would not be into all that? I don't know. Or are they moving into that pronoun situation?
It's a great question. We find that there are people of every generation that, depending on how they feel, they may move. It's not a catch like an all or nothing. Again, it's a spectrum. There are people, I say, like my age and over, we were very much, this is the way that you were masculine, you were feminine, you were this, you were that. And we understand that. There are people that are older that they threw those away a long time ago, you know? There are people that are in their 60s that I know that are like 60s, 70s, they're like, nope, I'm they, them. And that's awesome. The thing that we see is the youth today, the more that they are exploring and that they are opening their minds to that there was more than what they were taught, that their parents were taught, that their parents were taught, the more that they are expanding, the more identities you're going to see, because they are grasping at things that we didn't know, that we didn't, that we weren't taught. So it is every age, but it is a lot of youth as well, so.
It seems to me the word exploring is helpful.
Yeah,
It
Exactly.
just sounds helpful.
Yes.
And then this binary, I am binary, I am not binary. I'm still screwed up with that part.
it's okay.
We'll get there. Yes, it's okay. The thing that, if you don't live it every day, you're not going to know it. That's the thing. You don't live it every day. It's not your identity. And that's okay. You're here, and that's the biggest thing. I could hug all of you, because you're here, and that's a huge thing. There's still things that we hear about all the time that I'm like, I'm in the middle of work, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's something new. We're going to be learning this. We're going to be learning this again and again and again, so.
So where did it all come from?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I would say that it's timeless and has existed since people have existed. There's anthropological research that has been done on ancient cultures, and if you go back, like you look at the Persian culture, you look at the Indian culture in a couple of thousand years ago, in the Hindu civilizations, even in our Native American and other indigenous communities, there's always been this idea that gender is fluid. There's always been male, female, and then a space for a third gender, where people have identified as neither male or female, but something in between or something else altogether. Indigenous folk talk about the two-spirited person, like a person that embodies both the male spirit and a female spirit, and so I would say that it's always been there. I think what's changed is the language, that we have developed language to talk about it. So when Denise was talking about even the generational difference, we just have more language to talk about it. That doesn't mean that people that were that identify as non-binary didn't exist. It's just that there wasn't language to be able to talk about it. So your only options were either you're male or you're female or you're trans, right? Those were the three options you had, and you didn't have any other option. And so I would say that as the language has evolved and given people the words to be able to express who they are, you're seeing people feeling empowered to be able to identify and say for themselves who they are. And I think this language is going to continue to evolve. I often hear this, when I'm doing work with youth. I also do a lot of work with researchers at the center. And sometimes, the question does arise, is like, well, these young kids, they're all non-binary these days, and they're all like pansexual these days. Like, what does that even mean? And I think that, I see it as a really positive sign. I feel very proud of the progress that we have made as a movement and as a society, although, sometimes lately it's questionable, but the fact that youth feel safe enough to self-disclose. Like, think about it. Like, in 2013, you couldn't even imagine having these types of conversations in the socio-political landscape. The fact that we are talking about it, is it perfect? No. Is it where it needs to be? No. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And, frankly speaking, as you and I sit here right now, the movement is being pushed back, and there's a lot of rights and that are being taken away. But I think I still see that as progress when I think about the youth, and more, every other day there seems to be an article where the headline is, an increasing number of youth identify as part of the LGBT community, or an increasing number of youth, more and more youth are identifying as non-binary and kicking the gender binary. And I think that that's great. I think that that they feel safe enough and confident enough in who they are, and they're not afraid to say, I'm on a journey, I'm figuring it out as to who I am. But that whole idea of like self-actualization, that's that process. That's what they're doing. They're working towards self-actualization. Yes.
So if someone says, I'm non-binary, what are they telling me?
So I would think of it as, computer code, you have zeros and ones, right? And so 0 means something, 1 means something, so there's 2 codes. That's the binary. So in terms of gender, that's male and female. When somebody says that I'm non-binary, that means that they don't align with that notion of only like the 0 and the 1, or like only the 2 choices, the binary choice. Mm-hmm. They don't claim that as their identity. Either one.
Yep. Awesome. Did we have a question? Oh, I thought there was a microphone. Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you. Are there any other questions before we? Okay. So we were talking about allies and how to support LGBTQ plus people. The basics of being an ally: you work towards understanding your own privilege. So you recognize it when it's appropriate, and you use it to support your LGBTQ plus community and friends. You talking to your friend about, you say, grandchild, you were an ally. It doesn't take big declarations. They can be, but it's one small step. That's huge. Realize that being an ally is 24/7. It is not every other Tuesday I'm going to take off my hat and then I'm going to, hey, I'm an ally today, and then you take it off and I'm not. You are an ally every day. LGBT individuals are multifaceted. There is no universal experience, and be careful not to reduce them to their status. So, like I said, like Gulnar has said, like, we're on a spectrum. People are on a spectrum. Some may be this way, some may be that way. Some may be one binary or the other, or they fall in between. I'm a lesbian, yes, but I am also a dog owner of a little dog that I love. I'm also a theater director. I work at the center. I am a speaker to you all. I'm Italian. Hey, there is a lot of things that make us up besides who we love or how we identify. Actively combat interpersonal and systemic discrimination. It takes one person. It takes one person to make a ripple, and those ripples catch. Did you want to add to anything? Yeah.
I was just gonna, piggyback off of what you were saying around the interpersonal and systemic discrimination, and also not reducing people to the status. And I think that's where a good understanding of intersectionality and what it means to be intersectional as people comes in handy. So when we talk about intersecting identities, right? Denise just gave a great example of, Yes, she's a lesbian, but she also is a woman. She also is a dog owner. She's also a theater director. These are all these intersecting identities that she holds. A level further is to think about intersecting identities and the disparities that come from holding multiple marginalized identities. So I can give myself as an example. I am a Muslim, so there's a lot of Islamophobia that I have to face. I'm brown, right? I cannot remember one time when I have gone through the airport and not been pulled aside for additional screening just because of how I look and been asked if I'm from the Middle East, even though I'm not from the Middle East. When we talk about, presenting as a woman, right? We already know the disparities that exist for women in general in our societies around pay, around the workplace, around career growth. I also am economically disadvantaged, right? I grew up in, I wouldn't say abject poverty, but I grew up poor. So generational wealth is not something that I can lean on. I live paycheck to paycheck. I have to find a side hustle. And then being part of the LGBT community, when I think about, wanting to have a child, when I think about wanting to have retirement, I'm a single household, don't have a partner's income that I can lean on. If I want to have a child, again, those are additional expenses. But for me to have a child, I need to rely on assisted reproduction, right? And that's expensive. And that's not covered by insurance, as I am discovering as I navigate that journey right now. And so, in so many ways, there are these marginalizations that happen at every level of society and how I have to navigate society, that when you put them together, there's a multiplier effect. And so the impact of that showing up over and over again in different ways in my life has a huge multiplier effect. And so when we say allies understand their privilege, what I like to call it is that allies have skin in the game. They're willing to utilize the power that comes with their privilege to stand beside and walk the journey, that they're willing to put aside their discomfort or fear of speaking up and saying something because they have the power to actually say something or to do something. And so I just wanted to sort of make that point around interpersonal and systemic discrimination and where allyship can be useful and helpful. Like the fact that you are all here in this room, that's allyship, and I'm grateful for it. The fact that you were willing to have probably an uncomfortable conversation with your friend around terminology, right? Like you put aside that discomfort to be an ally, to speak up for somebody who may not have power in that relationship with their grandparent, because there is a power dynamic there between child and adult, to speak up for someone that may not otherwise have a voice. So that's where I wanted to go with that. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, well, and then just the last two are just to speak up, but not over. I would not educate Gulnar on, I would not sit there and school Gulnar on what it is like to be a woman of color and Muslim. No, I'm going to listen. But if I see something, if I see her being, like if I see someone being against her, or I see her in a situation where someone is trying to oppress her, I am going to speak up. But I'm never going to school someone that on a story that is not mine. And then continue your self-education. We're here today. There's much more to learn. One of the coolest things that I like to talk about is I do all of the volunteer orientations at work because I'm over the volunteer team. In the past 6 months, I've had, I do them monthly, and I've had close to 20 allies come. Now these are not close to, like 18 or 19 allies. These are not people that their child or their grandchild or their brother or somebody is in the LGBTQ plus community. These are people that have a friend who identifies, a coworker who identifies. So someone in your world that is not like your immediate family, That's allyship. So they're educating themselves more by coming and volunteering at the center, even though they may not identify in our community, but they're still coming and they're still learning. And thank you. Okay, this is where we talked about missteps. Missteps. It is okay. You recognize it, you own it, you change it, and you grow. It is intention versus impact. You have it comes from your heart. You have every intention on addressing someone with respect as they wish to be identified. You may make a hiccup sometimes. That's where you give it the respect it deserves. I am deeply sorry. I'm sorry that I did. May I have your pronouns again? You take it, you file it in that little Rolodex, and you get it the next time. And then you move on. And, that was it. And I think that's, yes. So the key takeaways. Listen to the LGBTQ individuals' wants and needs. You are mindful of stereotypes and being insensitive to outdated language. Create opportunities for conversation. This is what we're doing right now. Sit in your discomfort. Even if you don't understand, like you said, it might be a uncomfortable situation, but you sit in your discomfort.
I always say get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yep.
Because that's where growth happens.
Pronouns, pronouns, pronouns. All I can say, we only have control over how we present ourselves and how we enter the situation. I give my pronouns, that's what I have control over. I come in arms open. And know your resources. We are your resources. So along with us, we have handouts of quite a few, and actually this is our next slide. May I have our next slide, please? Thank you. So you actually have a handout of all of these. These are local and statewide resources that they are national, well, as it says, local and statewide. You have the center, which is us. GLSEN, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network. CMSD, School of One, is a Cleveland Metropolitan School District high school that is inclusive of LGBTQ+ students. It is located in the center. It's a very cool experience for students. I'm so proud of that. Yeah. This was Gulnar's baby, to bring the high school there. Colors Plus Youth Center it's an after-school youth program, but it is also counseling services from youth to adult that's located in Fairview Park. PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays. Equality Ohio is the legal organization. They deal a lot with LGBTQ+ rights. Human Rights Campaign, HRC. You have Bravo, which is the Buckeye Regional Anti-Violence Organization. Trans Family is a group, it's a social group, it's a social support group that meets at the center, and a social support group means that it is run by an individual in the community, not by a counselor, but it's for anyone who has a loved one who is transgender, someone that you know who's trans, or you yourself may be transitioning. This is Trans Family. And then the Metro Health Pride Clinic. Metro Health Hospital has a fully functioning clinic that is stationed in the center. It is geared towards people who are thinking of transitioning, who are beginning their journey. Because as Gulnar said, one of the main areas of disparities where our community hits is with medical assistance, medical help. The clinic makes it possible for them to go into a space where they know they are going to be seen and heard for who they are. But it is a full service clinic. Like my doctor, she's 10 steps away from my office. It's very cool, so, yeah. But yeah. And then we have one more slide. These are your online resources. I won't go through all of these because like I said, there is a handout that you have that has all of these websites on there. And you also have the opportunity for our cards if you have any questions on that. And then that's us. And some of the programs we have really quick, we have community programs, we have discussion support groups, we do advocacy and social justice, we do social events, education and awareness training. Hey, that's you guys right now. We have internship programs, and then we have volunteer programs. And last slide. Hey, thank you. So with that being our presentation, are there any questions? We have time real quick for a Q&A session. If anyone has any questions that they'd like, or comments, or yeah.
Additional thoughts, questions?
Tap dance? Yeah. No, I really can't, but yeah. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. I like that. Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Well, we will say thank you again for joining us. So as I said, there are handouts. There are also, we ask if you have time, you don't have to, but there are evaluations that we ask because we're always looking for your feedback. And it helps us learn and grow, like what you learned from it, what you didn't, and like to give examples on like ideas on if you think that it should add this.
How can we get better?
Yeah, how do we
Always
get
trying to
better?
get
How do we make it better? Jeannie has those, and we also have pens and everything for you. If you wouldn't mind doing that on the way out. Thank you very much, everybody.
And if you have suggestions of topics that you would like to hear more about, would like us to come back and present on, please let us know. We are here as a resource, like Denise mentioned, and these are conversations that we want to have on an ongoing basis and continue to support the community in walking this journey alongside us. So please add those to the evaluations.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, I work at all different theaters. I'm working at, actually, you know what? Because this is not publicizing it, there is a Disciple Christian Church over on Mayfield. They have a new cultural arts center. A friend and I will be doing a female identifying, non-binary, queer Jesus Christ superstar in the fall. So that is my next project. That will go up in mid-September. So that's the next one we're working on. So yeah, thanks for asking.